So Night on Earth is a clin d'oeil to a movie by Jim Jarmusch, a movie of the early 1990s entitled Night on Earth. Night on Earth is the story of taxis, taxi driver and clients that happen on planet Earth during the same night in different places. Helsinki, Rome, Paris, Miami, New York, etc. And they used the narrative structure of the movie as the narrative structure of the book. So the book is built around episodes, and the taxis are the humanitarian institutions that I've been working on. The taxi drivers are the women and men that were, on the spot in the Near East, and the recipients of aid are the clients of these taxis. And so there is a tale of miscommunication between, just like in the movie, between the clients and the taxi drivers. But there is more. As it often happens, the client has ideas about how to reach her destination, and she would like to take a given route. But of course, the taxi driver knows better, and in the end, he or she decides how to take the recipient of aid or the client to destination. And so it seemed to me that that particular structure and narrative framework was a useful way of telling the story that I wanted to tell. I think we historians are always very obsessed with the quest for origins. And this is a fundamental mistake because, what I noticed for sure is that plenty of these actors were persuaded to be very secular, but in fact their practices continue to be really informed by what religious actors like the missionaries had been doing for a very long time in this region. So there are continuities, but there are also ruptures in terms of the practices, the way in which technology played a role in the ways in which the recipients of humanitarian aid were actually helped at this time. I was surprised because I had to resist the narratives and the sources that were telling me a story when in fact things were actually very different on the ground. First of all, when you read the sources produced by these institutions, they are at the center of it all, and basically the posture of the savior is all over the place. Actually, a more granular, careful reading of the sources allows us to see that many other local actors were taking care of people in need. There were many local networks, and even an empire like the Ottoman Empire developed so many ways in which local populations could be helped out on the basis of their religion, of their faith, or on other basis like the city institutions, the local institutions. So yes, and I would also add that there is a fundamental misreading of the history of Western humanitarianism. We tend to imagine it as, being funded on the idea of being short-term, but for the vast majority of the actors that I've been working on, the idea of short-term aid is insufficient. They wanted to go beyond relief. They wanted to reconstruct or to construct. They want to rebuild. And a term that was used an awful lot back then was rehabilitation. And this is why I refer to relief and rehabilitation many times in the book. I try to respect the voices of these people. I've been very critical of the work that they've been doing, but we should not forget that very often they were animated by the best intention. Their best intention might have had deadly consequences of which they were not ready to take any responsibility for, and this should be said. But at the same time, the stories are stories that I tried and tell with a kind of sensitivity, because these stories are about human tragedy, the death of people, the deportation of children, the genocide of the Armenians, of course. And so there is something that has to do with the ways in which we tell the story as historians that matter and matters to me. I wanted to be as respectful and delicate as I could, and maybe he came up with this term poetic for this reason.